Hi guys, in this video we're going to look into cameras. So you might want cameras to have different views of your scene, or maybe you're making an animation and you want to have cuts between different cameras. So you might want a camera that's a close-up, a camera that's a establishing shot, or something like that. So we can create some cameras. If we go up to the top left here, you can find the create menu. You can create a lot of stuff in here, but cameras is one of them. There's a few different types of cameras. We're just going to make this one at the top here just a generic camera. And when I click that, it's going to make this little camera here. And that is our camera. We've created a camera. Super duper simple. It's an object like everything else over here. So I could rename this. I could select this and call it close up camera. Okay. Now it's hard to see what this camera will see. So if we go up here into panels, we can go panels, perspective, and then I can see my close-up camera there. I can click that. Now I'm inside that camera. Now if I hold Alt and move around, I can really easily kind of move this camera around. If I go back into perspective, you'll see that now that camera is up there. So it's moved position from last time. So let's go back into that there. Now this is our viewport here. So if I go up to view here, and then I can actually select the camera. So it will select the camera. You can also do that over here. And I can click this one over here. So this is my attribute editor over here, the middle one. And this is going to bring up all the properties of my camera. There are a lot of things that you can do in here. So, for example, there is depth of field that you can play around with. And what that will do is it will blur the background and keep the foreground really crisp. So if I bring this closer to me now, okay, not the best example there. Let's see if I can, let's go into perspective and just move that a little closer to the camera. Okay, so now I've got this cone that's crisp and everything else is blurred in the background. And we can change that. So I can change the focus distance up here and make this, let's say 100. Okay, maybe too far. Let's try 50. 25. 10. Not sure where the other distance is. But yeah, you can play around with these settings and get them to what you want. It might take a little bit of trial and error to get what you want there. Okay, another thing that we can do is we can play around with this focal length here. So what this does is it zooms, essentially. It's kind of like a zoom. It's sometimes called field of view. A generic field of view is 45 on here, so that's like a normal value. If I pull this further away, you can see it sort of stretches out and gives you this strange effect here. If I pull it together, everything becomes a lot more flat there. So be careful with how you use this and try and think about it like a normal camera there. Okay, so there's a few of the camera options that you can do. Now, one of the really cool things you can do with a camera is you can see what it's going to render out in terms of the area. So if I go up to view and I go up to camera settings, I can add a resolution gate on here. And this now puts a little gate, so it shows me my view here, and it shows me the resolution that that camera is rendering at. And I can change that by going up here to the settings, and these are render settings here. And if I go down, I can see that I've got my presets here, and we've been using HD 1080. So if I click that, it's now HD 1080. But you'll notice that it didn't really change the aspect ratio. If I put this to 1000 by 1000, then that's going to make my resolution square there. If I put it back to 1920 by 1080, I've got my nice 16:9 aspect ratio there. Cool. Okay, so last thing, we can press view, select camera to make sure we've got that camera selected, and we can actually animate this camera here. So if I press S, I'm going to set a keyframe if I move forward in time, and rotate around slightly, and then press S. This camera is now going to rotate between those 2 points. Okay. Now it can be quite tempting to do lots of crazy animation where you're sort of zipping around and tracking your character, but I would try and avoid large motions in the camera and try and think of your camera as if it was a physical camera and where you could physically put that camera. If you think like that, it will make it so much easier for you. So imagine there's a little guy holding this camera here and pointing it. So generally in movies, if you watch them and you actually have a look at the camera, we tend to get some maybe nice slow little zooms and pans like this. So small motions that add a fairly nice effect rather than really large motions. And that field of view that I showed you earlier, if I right click on this, I can set a keyframe there, and then if I go forwards to that one there, if we just set this to maybe, let's say 50, so there's a slight zoom, set a keyframe there, it's now actually got a zoom on it as well there. Okay, so be careful when you're animating a camera, try and imagine it as a real camera. Okay, so in this video we've looked at creating cameras and switching cameras. We've had a look at their properties, we've had a look at animating them. This should give you a good basis to build your own cameras for your own scenes, and obviously you can have as many as you want, depending on what your animation or whatever it is needs. Okay, alright, thank you very much.